What's good, everybody? Sherman Webb-Middlebrooks, a lifelong Buffalo resident and full-time black man, back here with another episode of Igniting Hope Radio, the podcast. I have a tremendously special guest here today. It's an honor to sit down with this good brother. We have the good brother, Dr. Jamal Williams, assistant professor of psychiatry over at UB. He's a neuroscientist, a health equity ambassador, and an Igniting Hope planning team member. He's also somebody who I've known since our days at Duville, back when it was Duville College together.
Yeah.
Some of the only specks of color you might have seen on campus. And so us just having that sense of unity definitely helped me through some of them lonely days in the library. So it's great to see what you've done with your life, good brother. It's great to have you on the podcast to talk about Igniting Hope. So really quick, we want to make sure that y'all know our Igniting Hope conference is coming up September 20th. We also have the day before our Community Day at Martin Luther King Park. That will be September 19th. So make sure you join us. All right, let's get into it. So, good brother, let them know who you are, a little bit about the work that you do, and how you got into this work. What was young Jamal like, and did you always know that you wanted to work in science and give back to the community?
All great questions, and yeah, definitely. I want to amplify what you said about back in the Uville College days.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a school of about 3,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Probably less than 100 of us was people of color, and then within that 100, even fewer was African American.
Right.
You know, who kind of
Right.
shared similar experiences.
Right.
That we shared, but it was also really interesting getting to see other people from the African diaspora and see how they live and how they get down. Because growing up in Buffalo, I wasn't really exposed to that. So it was like, okay, you from Ghana, you from Nigeria, and saying that, you know, they got the wache, or they arguing over like whose jollof is the best, or whatever, you know. So it was like a different experience too, and one that I much appreciate, and, you know, building with you.
No doubt,
and,
no doubt.
Also happy about how our lives and careers sort of just keep weaving through each other. So
it's a blessing.
Yeah. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York.
Mm-hmm.
You know, proud to say really had a great upbringing in terms of community. It was definitely a community that didn't have much, but it was one of those families where, you know, we didn't have much and that was normalized, but it wasn't like emphasized. You know, it wasn't like you wasn't made to feel oppressed.
I like
every
that.
day. You know,
I like that. Say that again. Say that again one more time.
What I say? It was normalized, but it wasn't emphasized.
Yeah.
Right. So we, you know, my grandmother wasn't walking around talking about like how broke we was. You know, and we was kind of made to stand up tall and to have resilience and different things like that, and also to just value other things that wasn't necessarily material too. So that's, you know, my early days. But because of sort of the way we grew up, my grandmother took in a lot of people in her house. We grew up off Jefferson Avenue, and it was one TV upstairs, one TV downstairs. This is, you know, pre-internet as well.
Okay, right.
Tablets,
right,
none of that.
right.
So I spent most of my time reading. And if I wasn't reading, I was watching, like, you know, some of the hood movies I would tape on TV, and then I would use my aunt's recorder that you could put the VHS tape inside, and you look through the joint. So I'd be watching the movies with no audio because there was never no room to get on the TV. But so I just read a lot.
Wow, that's crazy. You was going through it. You was really thugging it out.
Yeah, but it was a part of the fabric of who I am.
Exactly.
Having a chance to just be able to read so much. It's definitely a pastime I still tend to now. And then having a father that was an immigrant, and sort of spending time with that side of my family, and having that you know, first generation kind of American experience too. It was definitely a great sort of upbringing that really shaped me, because it was just all about community. Everything was all about family and how we really getting it together, and how we had that value system of being there for each other. But then things start happening over time, and you question like why people have to go too soon, right? You know, whether it be from violence, or whether it be from diabetes, which is another form of violence, and or heart disease and different things like that, right? So you start to question why that was. You start to question, why, when my aunt come around, everybody, get a little weird and everything, and why she always look like, why her clothes don't fit or she don't look well kept, and you start asking questions. And in the black community, sometimes like we're not really putting our information out there, so it's like you're a curious kid, and you like so you can either being told a lie or being told to shut up, right?
Yeah.
But then as I start peeling back those layers, I guess is when, before health equity started becoming more of a buzz term, the questions that I was, being confronted with was essentially circled around equity. It was basically like, why do things have to be the way they are? And so I was always a curious person. And then when I seen how people were living 15, 20 minutes out in the suburbs, that's when the contrast came, that relative difference. That's when the disparity can be defined, because now I know what something else look like that people are not going through. That's when, you get your first, white friend, and their parents take you somewhere and you ain't got to pay gas money. You're like, I don't got to give you gas money. Why would you give us gas money for our, this is our car. We wouldn't get, okay. It's like you start seeing things wasn't as tight, and then all of those things. So, I definitely didn't live a sort of straight edge life or a square life and, different things like that. But I was always a person who was very curious and very invested in what was happening in my community. Science definitely wasn't something on my radar or something that I was naturally good at. But I knew whatever I did with my life would be focused on like answering some of those questions. And once I started to see what would become known as these disparities, closing the gap in those disparities, I just didn't know how I would do it or if I would ever have the privilege to do something like that.
That's dope. So like some of that story, like I knew just from just like knowing you, being around you, stuff that you share, stuff that like I've seen you share public. Some of the stuff like I kind of like didn't know. So I appreciate you just opening up and letting me and letting the people in our audience really know just how real it can get, but also that like you're real. So you can come from them circumstances, and then like if you keep your mind right, and you can overcome those kinds of environments, and then also like be an asset to the community. So neuroscience, mental health, and particularly like ADHD, like you were saying just that like you weren't really good in the science, or you didn't think that like science would be your thing. I had no idea when we was at Duville that like this was the path. Like I knew you was a smart brother, cause like I always saw you in the library or the computer lab. You lived there.
DAC.
In the DAC, like you lived there. Yeah. So like I'm like, this brother is working hard. But like I didn't know you was working this hard, bro. So like talk to us, man. Neuroscience, mental health, ADHD, like you studying the brain. What's that like, bro? Cause it sounds cool, and I know I got ADHD myself. I'm self-diagnosed though.
Okay. A lot of people in our generation is. Yeah. And I'll, maybe within this conversation, we can talk a little bit about why that is. But yeah, for me, when we was at the Uville, before I was at the Uville, I was at ECC because initially I wanted to do pharmacy technician. Okay. Down at the Equal Opportunity Center, which is now on 77 Goodell, right? Yep. They shut the program down because they lost funding for that round. But it turned out that this adult learners test called a TABE test, TABE. It turned out I got a perfect score on the joint. Oh. So the director of the program was like, hey, you can do dental hygienist, you can pick this, you can pick that. And I was like, hold on, I got a perfect score on this joint, so maybe I should just go to real college, right? Word. Real college for me was ECC. So I was like, so I enrolled in ECC, and then the pharmacy kind of question was in the back of my mind. I still kind of wanted to do a pharmacy tech job, even if I had to go through community college. But then the Uville came and did like a kind of community fair, and they were saying, hey, you don't have to finish out your degree here. You can just come over to us, and we have a pharmacy program. You do 2 years of undergrad, you do 4 years of PharmD, a doctorate. You can be a pharmacist. Like, I could be a whole pharmacist, 6-figure salary. I thought about it as a stable career, and also something that I can do that maybe at least talk and communicate to people in the area about like their drugs and stuff. So I thought, this could be a meaningful career. it didn't really turn out like that. Once I really got into the sciences and into the math and stuff, because math was my other degree when we was at Duville, I was like, it seemed all right, but I feel like I could go deeper if I go another route. So I just did my degrees in biology and math, went on, did my master's just to, keep thinking about it a little bit more. And I was like, I think I'm kind of good at this research thing, and it let me explore things very deeply. So to answer your question, during my master's degree, I took some bonus classes. I was a TA, so we could our tuition was free, and I could, max up my credits. So I was taking like graduate chemistry courses just for like, for fun or whatever. One of the classes I took.
Go ahead, flex, bro. I'm sitting here like, is he about to say for fun?
No, it was. I mean, you heard about the class. So one of them was analytical toxicology, which was really just a class on learning about explicit drugs, how they made and what they was about. So I was super interested. So I signed up for the class. I thought we was gonna be cooking cocaine, but we didn't do that until I got to UB. Then my first lab, I started making cocaine. But we'll talk about that later. So when I was there and I started reading about this other dude, this neuroscientist at Columbia named Carl Hart. Black dude, got long dreads, everything. He, his whole demeanor seemed very interesting to me. And I started listening to what he was saying and what I was learning about analytical toxicology. I started learning that all of what we thought we knew about drugs was not true. What we learned in DARE,
they lied to us.
Commercials, yeah, like you take, a drug one time, you on the floor having a seizure. Remember them things?
This is your brain.
This your brain on drugs. This is not the case. For two reasons. One is that, at least at the time, and this was slightly pre the opioid epidemic, so-called opioid epidemic, the data showed around 85 to 88% of people who use drugs are not addicted. They're just drug users, right? So it's only like a small minority of people.
What will classify or qualify somebody as being an addict or addicted?
So it's when they develop some sort of dependence on that drug, which most of the time comes from some sort of hardship, some sort of self-medicating, or it could be because of a lot of people, as we found out later with the Oxycontin stuff, was just in pain, and they just became sort of conditioned that this is what alleviates their pain. So whether it's like a physical pain, emotional pain, a phantom pain, people who build that dependence, it's essentially just a straight path to addiction.
Gotcha.
Because that's what's alleviating whatever they're going through. So if you actually think about that, not to get off topic, as the root cause for addiction, that means we should be focusing on what? Social determinants of health.
Yes. We
should be focusing on the environment that people in that puts them in that position where they felt like they have to, drink a 40 every day, just to feel like, they getting through, or not just a 40, but like, how it is with alcohol, or like just, with cocaine or crack or pills, whatever people was doing. So I started learning about that, and then I also learned that actually most of the drugs that people using on the street, they give it in the hospital. Sometimes they might be off by like one methyl group or something.
Right.
Some of the stereochemists out there, they might be saying like, one methyl group is, that's a carbon with three hydrogens. That's a big difference. But actually, if you look at like something called pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, how these drugs bind and their bioavailability is pretty similar. So something like amphetamine, like a medication for ADHD, and methamphetamine are not that.
So that people be comparing like meth or speed and like Adderall.
It's just one carbon difference.
Yeah.
And the binding and how the drug works in the body is essentially the same.
So because you have, what is it, the reuptake?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just got a bachelor.
Yeah. No, but that's right. So
I understand
that same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense.
So really, it's like, well, what makes drugs bad? Well, actually, what makes them bad is that we confine people to have to go to sketchy places to pick up their drugs, and then the way drugs is made on the street, with various additives, is what makes it
cutting
harsh.
it with
like
fentanyl, rat poison,
all that kind of stuff. Meth mouth. You don't see people with ADHD with meth mouth, and if it's the same thing, right? It's the way people was cooking up the drugs, right? So it's like I really got into like, it's some debate around this. it's multiple debates around this, but sort of like harm reduction.
Yeah,
In the sense,
I'm
like,
familiar with that.
let's just allow people to use the drugs that they want in a controlled way so that at least we know that they're getting it safe, because they're going to get it anyway. Let's just make sure that it's safe, it's prepared right.
That is true.
And then I read a study that the most effective study to reduce overdose and abuse of heroin was just giving it away. And I think this study took place in Seattle, and then they monitored people over time and was able to reduce like the number of emergency room admissions and overdoses related to heroin.
So Seattle just went to the plug and
in this controlled environment, in this controlled like study, yeah.
Like on The Wire, where they was like, y'all can sell drugs in this little area right here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha,
So you
gotcha.
know, it was some Marlowe over there, and, you know, and they had their kind of controlled environment, and you don't get the risk of people lacing it with fentanyl to make it more addictive or to make it more potent.
Yeah, to make more money off of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot of these things, and that's what got me into neuroscience. It was really through this kind of bonus class of taking analytical toxicology and seeing how these things is related and linking back to my aunt. Actually, she's my cousin, but you know, we call older cousins aunts, right? So you know what I'm saying? So like, you know, we ain't gonna call her by her first name, right? And then I started thinking about her and where things went wrong with her, and how addiction is a disease. It passes a disease level threshold that changes how your brain is functioning. It changes the genes that's up or down regulated when it's not supposed to be, right? So basically turning on or turning off certain genes that are out of homeostasis. Drugs is doing that to the brain under this sort of addictive state, and it's really pushing people to keep using drugs. It's not a willpower thing. And so that's what really got me into the epigenetics, and it got me into neuroscience, which eventually got me into genetics, and which eventually got me into psychiatry stuff.
So I want to get into that, but before we do, just another quick plug. Make sure that y'all join us September 19th, Martin Luther King Park, and then join us at the Jacobs School of Medicine over on Main Street, September 20th. So you were talking about epigenetics, and you brought that up too, and I kind of wanted to have you just elaborate on like breaking down what does ancestral genetics mean to you in your work, and why does something like ancestral genetics matter, especially when we're talking about understanding addictive behaviors, habits, or even traits, because I think so much of like my own personal journey has been guided by my privilege to watch many older people around me on both sides of my family. And then as I've had the privilege to enter my 30s, starting to see the unintentional patterns and ways I behave mentally and behaviorally, but also biologically. So starting to see like what kind of diseases are common in my family at certain ages and stages, what sort of addictions, what kind of personality traits, what sort of trauma responses and coping mechanisms are prevalent in my family. What have I been taught? What have I taught myself? So just I've always been a curious and reflective person ever since a child too. So I think that was part of my journey as a psychology student, was just trying to better understand why the people around me behaved and felt and acted the way they did, because I understood that I am how I am and who I am because of those around me who raised me and kind of taught me right from wrong, good as bad, approach, avoid, those sorts of things. And so as I grew older to sort of break the generational curses, a lot of that I was able to identify by understanding the psychology and the history of the people who seemed to be generationally cursed that I had access to. So like, I know I did a whole lot of jumping around, but just what are your thoughts about that and like ancestral epigenetics and how we break generational curses?
Yeah, that's That's great how you sort of frame that. And as you were talking, I was thinking, I think I can relate to a lot of what you share. It's complicated, but I think I'll just jump right in the middle. I'll jump in the middle through my own experience. So, I started off in epigenetics, which is when you don't actually change the DNA itself, but some environmental factor changes what genes are on and what genes are off. Okay. Right? So if we really go back to sort of just a very quick stem cell biology 101, before cells undergo a process called differentiation, they need to know where to go, right? So if anybody who's taken biology out there knows, all of our DNA is the same in every single cell, right? So that means our hair cell, our muscle cell, our brain cell, everything has the same DNA. Well, why do they look different, right? Why does my skin cell under the microscope look different from a neuron under a microscope, right? It's something called differentiation. It's essentially like the DNA is the same, but it's like a sort of, switchboard in terms of what genes are allowed to be turned on and turned off, genes that eventually turn for proteins, which are these little machines that do the work, in what combination to serve its purpose for that particular location. So like, my neuron might have certain proteins that's turned on to receive chemicals between other neurons or other kind of brain cell types, whereas like muscle cells, they may have, sort of some receptors for receiving, neuronal stimulation through something like neuromuscular junctions, but for the most part, they're designed to do a different kind of job, right?
So is it like your stem cells are kind of like, for lack of a better term, your soldiers, and the differentiation is their marching orders?
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you for helping me out with that.
No, I just want to make sure, like, I think I'm understanding this, but like I don't want to oversimplify it.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's exactly right. So what happens though is, this happens through development, even like, prenatally, right? This is already happening from the very first, from the zygote that we all started from. However, epigenetics, so basically changing the code, can happen throughout life as well. So although we can take a cell in a lab, like I could take your skin cell in a lab and I can reverse it all the way back to something called an induced pluripotent stem cell, and then I can turn it into one of your brain cells or a lot of brain cells, and I can put that in a dish from your muscles, from your skin cell, from a fibroblast. That doesn't happen when we just walking down the street. But what can happen is too much exposure to the sun, or smoking cigarettes, or stress, or drug use, or all these different environmental factors, toxins, or any of these kind of things. What they can do is they might not change the whole code, but they might start changing a couple dozen genes, turning them on and off in different combinations to adapt to that environment. And that change of what's on and off will change the function of those cells, right? So that's epigenetics essentially. So I was like really into epigenetics and neuroscience stuff, especially coming from this analytical toxicology background, and saying, okay, so drugs, they sort of can push certain genes to be off, certain genes to be on, which is upregulating or calling out these new proteins to do stuff that they shouldn't be doing in those positions, which we're learning are driving people to go back and, seek more cocaine, for example. But then one day, me and my homegirl, Megan, so shout out to Megan. She's doing her physician science training at Yale right now.
Shout out to Megan.
Only select 2 people in the country, but she was one of those people. You talk about sharpening swords, like me, her, and another colleague of mine, Ben. We would kind of just sit around and have coffee in the morning before we get to work and just talk about, like, just use our imagination. Right? So there's a lot of imagination and sort of artistry in science as well, in a creative process. And one day we were sitting and talking, and a question came up. We are all kind of sort of subspecialists in epigenetics, but what happens when an actual DNA template is varied? And how much does it vary ancestrally? Well, smart people knew this before. We stumbled upon this question, like how DNA changes ancestrally, but nobody was really answering a question, which is like, if the sort of frame, if the sort of template has this variation that's different between people of African descent and European descent, South Asian, East Asian, Hispanic, then how does that change the epigenetic processes when exposed to those environmental stimuli. A question that I still haven't really answered, but it took me on a journey back to human genetics, which is to understand why different ancestries or how different ancestries are different when it comes to disease susceptibility. And that's a more complicated process. We can talk about it later if you want, but that's sort of the biology background. But then, we heard an argument for many years about nature versus nurture.
Yeah, we talk about that in psychology all the time.
So nature essentially in this case is the DNA. Nurture is the environment, but we know that bridge is the epigenetics that we were just discussing. So it really just depends on context, right? So if we bring it all the way back to sort of the point of us meeting today and the point of the conference around igniting hope and health equity and things like that, right? If we, whether, we're from the same ancestry or not, if we have a certain level of risk as humans, as Homo sapiens for diabetes, for example, which is very genetic, right? So if that risk in my family is the same as a white person's in their family, okay, fine, we both should be conscious about this. But if that environmental factor is different, then that increases my susceptibility. So nature versus nurture, both are important, but it's a relative balance based on the resources that you have and the social capital that you have. So if I'm being fed garbage food, not a lot of time or ability to work out, or not a lot of education about why that's important, or all these things throughout this social ecological framework that's different between me and another person, then that's going to impact that end result. Whereas, if there's a person whose social determinants are in their favor, right, and they may also have a family risk of diabetes, but healthy food is more affordable. Education around eating healthy is more affordable. They have a more active lifestyle because of certain luxuries and privileges that they have. They have less stress related to maybe their financial situations or different things like that. Then they can maybe control that risk or lower it. So nature and nurture is important, but relatively different based on where you were raised.
You're making me think about, and I'm glad that I'm glad that we got Dr. Williams here to be able to break down this stuff on like a deeper level. Because I think our audience needs that. I think there's an audience for that. And I appreciate you being able to have like a higher level conversation. I'm sitting here like, oh, he breaking it down. The thing that I understood about epigenetics, this is the difference between the PhD and the bachelor's level. And they was just telling us about the study of the rats or the lab rats. And they put two of them in two separate cages, traditional study. And one rat, they gave the normal amount of food, water, and kept it cool. The other one, they gave it food and water sporadically, so not consistently. And they sent mild electrical charges through the floor rails of the cage. So it didn't really know where it could step without getting a shock.
Yeah.
So now they would test each rat periodically for cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. I've left out one detail. They were both pregnant. So what they ended up doing was seeing that the one that was dealing with the shocks and the inconsistent food had higher levels of the stress hormone. And when both rats gave birth, the one that was born to the one experiencing the trauma, that baby rat was also born with higher levels of the cortisol hormone being present at birth as compared to the other rat. So that was the case study for epigenetics and how they tried to simplify it for us. So I've always understood it from that level of if you stress somebody out over 400 years, imagine that. So that's what happened to our people. So but to be able to go farther than that simple, oversimplified sort of understanding, I think I think we have some people like you that are like here with that level of understanding. Then we got some people that's like with like a basic level, and then we got some people that don't even kind of know that this conversation is happening. So I think that it's dope that we able to kind of do this and then sort of bring everybody.
Hello, friends. This is Pastor George Nicholas, CEO of the Buffalo Center for Health Equity and chair for the African American Health Equity Task Force. I'd like to invite you to register to our 8th annual Igniting Hope Conference, which will be held on September 19th, which will have Community Day, and the full conference on Saturday, September 20th at the Jacob School of Medicine. We're excited this year because we're coming together to develop a plan for us to bring health equity to our community. So log on to our website, buffalohealthequity.org, buffalohealthequity.org, register and come, and we're moving this year from attendees to a participant. We're not looking for just folks to show up. We're looking for folks to show up and to bring their full selves and participate in building a plan for our community.
All right, so we back again, y'all, for real this time. And so if you're just joining us, we were having a conversation with the good brother, Dr. Jamal Williams, about his journey from Buffalo to the Brain Lab, basically, and everywhere in between. So we were talking about epigenetics and the study of ancestral genetics. So I was just making a comment about how there was a study where there were some lab rats that were both pregnant, and they monitored the cortisol levels of one rat that lived in a safe, nice, controlled environment, and one who they did food deprivation and sent electrical shocks through their cage, and they monitored the higher rates in cortisol of the stressed out infant rat versus the other one. And Dr. Jamal wanted to circle back to that. So talk to us, good brother.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up, because what you touched on is sort of where kind of classical epigenetics started, which is transgenerational epigenetics. So it's like, how did what happened to the mother get passed on to the child? So all of what I talked about so far may or may not have transgenerational factors. They may, as far as we know, just affect that person throughout their life, right, especially if they're past like reproductive age and things like that, right? But transgenerational epigenetics, what we pass on to our offspring, is something that I know some scholars and maybe even some here at UB are working on to think about, what did those 400 years do to black people, right? What does being under that immense amount of stress for generations and generations? So what you're talking about is stress from one pregnant rat
right,
to an offspring. But what happens if you compound that generation after generation after generation? What
millions of people?
Yeah, exactly. What happens, and then what kind of stress and exposures are we talking about? We're talking about humiliation and stripped of identity. We're talking about physical abuse, psychological abuse, brainwashing. We're talking about
sexual abuse.
We're talking about all these different things. What does that?
Yeah. Dealing with finance. Yeah, being financially isolated.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually surprising there wasn't an epigenetic switch that said, when we get free, we gonna fuck all this stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like, but that didn't seem to happen, even though that's actually a trope and a stigma that has been placed upon all colonized and oppressed people, is, well, we can't entirely let them free because they're going to do to us what we did to them. And that's never been true for black people, right?
Never.
Right? So we have that.
Fortunately or unfortunately. You take that how you want to.
Take it. Exactly. Take it how you want. And that's a whole nother kind of topic that I'm also interested in. But I teach epigenetics, and there's a classic study, and you may have heard about this in psychology. It's like the Dutch hunger famine.
Okay.
So in the Netherlands, during the reign of Nazi Germany, they were restricted from sort of trades and access to goods and resources, and sort of strangled off because of the, sort of racist and eugenic agenda of Nazi Germany, right?
Right.
What happened was these families starved, and this famine really impacted this really kind of well-documented population in the Netherlands. And what they found from testing descendants of these families was increased cardiometabolic disorders and different things like that, right, from this famine. And what they found was a lot of valuable information. I haven't seen much on how other populations have been impacted similarly to really support this, but this was such a well-documented point of history and such a sort of tragic thing that happened. You can, anybody can Google Dutch hunger famine and look at these pictures and look at these malnourished and famished individuals. But if we look at India has one of the highest rates per capita, probably the highest rate in share population because it's the biggest country in the world, of cardiometabolic disease, including diabetes, even in lots of thin people. Well, why does that happen?
Yeah.
Well, India was colonized before the British government by a private British company called the East India Company.
Yeah.
They were colonized by them, and under that colonial sort of process, there were maybe a half a dozen famines that existed over the course of, I think, maybe like 125 years or something like that. Why? Because the East India Company was sort of forcing local farmers to produce cash crops that could be used for export, extractive wealth, and not...
Because don't nothing naturally grow over in England.
Exactly, right? So, and it's actually expected that something like 45 to 60 trillion dollars of wealth was extracted from India during the reign of the East India Company in the 90 years after of the British government. So it's like if anybody should be knocking at that reparations door, I mean, this is a signal right now. Get that lick back.
For real.
Like, so the wealth extraction. But
it's enough of y'all.
But what happened after was crazy. So then it was 90 years of even more compressed, level of oppression and wealth extraction that happened, such that tens of millions of people died of starvation. To die of starvation is a grueling process, right? But there were some survivors. And the survivors, one could say, is the lucky ones or the unlucky ones, because what they carry was this curse of this transgenerational epigenetics. So they think, some researchers think that surviving one famine increases the risk for cardiometabolic disease by double. Just one, surviving one famine. So what happens if a person, so this was over the course of 90 years, so a person who may have, been in the middle of that 90 years and have, lived all the way through sort of the reproductive age might have experienced, a few, 3 or 4 famines. Right. And that's what is being passed down to their kids. And we can see that now with the sort of high rate of diabetes.
Interesting.
If we look at Yemen is a country that is probably the poorest country in the Middle East. It has had lots of sort of sanctions because of geopolitical reasons, but also a lot of, their economy was strangled, so much so that more than half of every child born is malnourished, and they have stunted growth, and they have all the increased risk of disease. Then if we look at Gaza today, and we look at like the sort of humanitarian crisis that's happening now, and we see that, every major human rights organization in the world, including the Israeli organization, human rights organization, B'Tselem, has said that this is a genocide, and so tens of thousands have been documented as being killed. Maybe hundreds of thousands have been killed that haven't been identified yet. But what happens to the survivors? When we see these, babies with this large head and really small body and skinny body, and we see them dying, and about 100 of them died just in the last 2 weeks of starvation. What happens to the ones that survive?
Right. What does their body have to adapt and do?
And once you reach that level of malnourishment, your body actually starts to reject food. you can't. So if you've been starved to the level of seeing the pictures that we can now see, that we can see that's been well documented, that's just now starting to circle around to like more corporate media outlets. If we look at those pictures, those kids are already in a state where they could still die of hunger even if they got
food,
accessible food today.
Wow.
It might be too late. Their body could still be rejecting that.
Wow.
So epigenetics is this, very immense biological factor that is really largely designed by, do I live too close to a rubber plant, right? Or some, manufacturing facility? Do I live in an environment where I'm super stressed? Do I live in a food desert? Do I live in a...
Are we still using the term food desert? Because some folks who I work with who like to hug trees use, and I say that term affectionately, don't cancel me. I'm just having a little fun here. I do stand up on the side. Yeah. But some of my tree hugger friends introduced me to the term food apartheid, because deserts occur naturally, and apartheid is on purpose.
Yeah.
And so I think I like that term, because none of this stuff that happened naturally. It happened on purpose through people in policy.
I would agree with that term. And so that's definitely a term, because there's so many different kinds of apartheid. So apartheid has existed for many, many generations, but it was only clearly defined by South Africa, the word itself. The etymology of the word was designed there, but we know that there's all different kinds of apartheid, and it's based on this sort of intentionality, right, to the haves and the have-nots. So yeah, food desert is more of a colloquial term, like well understood term.
Yeah, because
but to be more accurate, food.
You got to meet the people where they at.
Yeah, but maybe bring them over too. But I like you introducing that, because I would say that's a more legitimate characterization, actually.
Word. Man, this is a dope conversation that we having, man. We just getting started. What I want to do real quick is take the time to plug our event, which full transparency, I just wanted to hear the brother's story. I want y'all to hear the brother's story, because I think he's a tremendously inspirational person, especially having been in the same educational institution, in the same room, to like see what's possible and to know that it's possible. So not only do I want this brother to be an inspiration to y'all, he's been an inspiration to me. So we are here again to plug our Igniting Hope Conference. We are having a pre-conference community day, September 19th, Martin Luther King Park. Come have some fun with us, learn about the different resources and assets that are available to you in your community. And then the next day, please join us at the Jacob School of Medicine over on Main Street for our Igniting Hope Conference, where the theme this year is saving ourselves, implementing a community plan for health equity. So we're focused on strategic planning, not just coming together to convene and then leave feeling good and full, because we're going to feed you. So we want folks to come to plan and not play, September 20th. So talk to us. How did you personally become involved in the Igniting Hope Conference? What does the Igniting Hope Conference mean to you, both personally and professionally? And how did you go from presenting to planning? Ooh, that was a lot of alliteration with people.
Yeah, that was good. That was good wordplay right there.
Appreciate you.
So I was a graduate student when the Igniting Hope Conference came about, and I was asked by a couple of professors to take notes for some of the breakout groups, a tradition that's still happening right now.
Cool.
And so I was a somewhat sufficient note taker and note speaker, and but more so I was an observer at the same time that really enjoyed that something this timely could be possible. What year did it start?
I think this is our 9th year, 8th or 9th.
Okay, so
it's the
what's
8th
the
or
math
9th.
on that? That's like,
My daughter's 9, so that's 16.
Okay, that's 16.
Yeah, it will take us to 2016.
Okay.
Wow, I have a 9-year-old. That's crazy.
So we might not be at 9 yet. But you got a 9-year-old. Yeah, we might not be at 9 yet, but I can't remember exactly when. But I remember.
I just came on 3 years ago.
Yeah.
This would be my third. This would be my third conference with
This
the
is
center.
something that I should know, but I think it probably started around 2019 or 2020,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. So I might not be clear on the facts, but the feelings about what I had around Igniting Hope is that it was a conference that felt very timely. It felt that it was a feeling of finally we have something and we have a space that made its way into the university. Or
2018.
2018. Okay.
2018.
So it made its way into the academy, and you got to talk about, these different things and see people represented from all over the country and people doing research on these kind of things, which even me as a researcher in a sort of very sterile environment didn't really know that people were using their research prowess to tackle these sort of questions.
Gotcha.
So the first day of PhD school, I guess, they show everybody this
Yeah,
bubble.
talk
and they say,
about
hey,
it. PhD school,
I
bro.
guess,
Yeah.
They said, this is a bubble of knowledge. You're going to add this little fine, small bubble to the top of it. So basically what they're saying is this, you become a specialist, but you also become very restricted. So I was in that restricted phase. And so I still had my sort of extracurricular endeavors and my, still social justice work, but I actually didn't know, outside of very, small and somewhat meaningless things that I was trying to work on at the time, that I could really bridge the gap, or that people were actually bridging those things and putting them together until the Igniting Hope conference.
Ooh.
And I was like, okay, so people with MDs behind their name and PhDs behind their name is figuring out how race and environment is affecting people's health outcome, and that's pretty cool. And so I was really inspired by it. Unfortunately, by the time 2020 came around, I think that was the first conference because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It went
It was
virtual.
Yeah.
So it was nimble.
Still hearing about the virtual conference.
Right, so
I wasn't on staff at that time.
In all transparency, I don't remember much about it. I think maybe that's the problem, because we sort of were forced to the screen and things didn't really seem as intimate, and the energy didn't feel the same in the world around us.
Yeah, because
right?
being in that room at the Jacobs School of Medicine, being in that lecture hall, that room,
Seeing it filled up.
yeah, it's a different environment. You feel a part of the conversation,
Yes.
no matter where you're engaging. So if you're presenting, obviously you're part of the conversation.
Yeah.
If you have something to add because you're doing some of the work, you feel a part of it. But even if you're just a fly on the wall participant,
Yeah.
you still feel welcome, involved, and engaged in the conversation to the point where you start reflecting on, I might have thought I shown up with like nothing to add or contribute, and then by the end you're like, oh, I know how I could like
Yep.
jump in it and benefit the movement and the work. So
Yep.
that's at least a space that it seems has been created the past 2 years that I've been involved, and I'm looking forward to this third year as well. My bad, bro. Please continue.
No, you said it right. That connection is what really drew me to it, and we really didn't take too many L's. I think only one conference was online, and I think it bounced right back the year after, if I'm not mistaken. So so just being a part of that experience, and then going on to do my postdoc, which was in Los Angeles at UCLA.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I had to I was in between like both spaces, but still really trying to get involved or at least participate. And then my first year back as a faculty in 2023, I was able to not just be like a observer or a note taker or note speaker. I was able to be a part of the keynote session where we interviewed the family and descendants of Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah,
Right?
the book right here.
Yep, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that was an enjoyable experience how it came.
You did a great job facilitating that conversation.
Yeah, it was a unusual sort of kind of challenge for me, but I really do love a challenge. So I took it really. So I had my note cards.
You did.
I had, you know,
It looked like a real live like talk show from the '90s, but like it wasn't like
I was trying to get my Arsenio Hall.
You was.
What color cards Arsenio Hall had? I'm gonna get me some blue ones.
Yeah.
From Office Max.
Yeah, I peeped it.
So I took it serious. I was in the role.
Yeah, you did great.
You know, you know, and professionally, I would say that it's been like, again, this sort of outlet that is sort of, I guess, flexible, for lack of, you know, me being able to think of something better to describe it, but in an environment where we can say, you know what, the conference should be about this or should be about that, or we should add this component or that. And sometimes I like to just go and chill and watch, but also being a part of it, being able to figure out things as they're happening and address them on its head.
Yeah.
So, you know what's been done, I think was right on time, and the like how it's grown, the fact that we're able to sit in the studio like this right now is a testament.
Yeah.
To what this conference really has been able to do and all the legs that came out of it, right? The Erie County Office of Health Equity,
Yep.
the UB Community for Health, the Community Health Equity Research Institute, that now has a new director that has just taken the reins. All these things were happening from congregating.
Yeah, having conversations. So I think that's a tremendous point and something that goes overlooked. And I know we're doing community work, social justice work, activism work, and it kind of leads us back to the theme of saving ourselves, implementing a community plan for health equity. And I've been guilty of this too. Folks have meeting fatigue. And sometimes folks feel like we just meeting to have a meeting about the meeting. And you just meeting to have a meeting about what you met about last time.
Yeah.
And so people get meeting fatigue. However, that's when like you in the forest.
Yeah.
If you zoom, that's when you in the trees. If you zoom out and see the whole forest, you realize with perspective, like these great things were accomplished because we had meeting after meeting after meeting, and we kept meeting.
Yeah.
And we still meet.
Yeah.
And so I know for me, again, I've been guilty of having meeting fatigue, especially if there seems like there's no like leadership or direction. And sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I need to step up and do some leadership or direction. That might be an opportunity. Sometimes I take it, sometimes I don't. I will encourage you all out there to evaluate and pick and choose the battles. But just to have the reflection of knowing that like this is how things get accomplished. So just being mindful out there, like if you're experiencing meeting fatigue and you and folks that you're working with are trying to plan something, just think about what you have accomplished before.
Yes.
And how many meetings you had to meet before the day of for things to go smooth. So I just want to put that out there because I'm in the work, I do the work, I support people that do the work. And I need people to do this work, and I don't need my battle buddies getting burnt out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I don't want to do this. I don't need people getting burnt out because then y'all gonna leave me. So I need people to take care of themselves out here, bro. Trying to take care of myself. So thinking about that's part of my strategic plan. So thinking about you, the work that you're doing with your institution, organization. Not really sure how. I would communicate that. But just the work that you're doing both personally and professionally, what would you say like the strategic planning of saving ourselves and implementing a community plan for health equity? What does that statement mean to you? What does that theme mean to you?
That's an interesting question because depending on what year you ask me, the answer could feel vastly different. But I think the core principles, at least my core principles, and one could call me dogmatic or something like that, but have remained largely the same. That I promise not to go too far away from your question, but in my opinion, this whole equity question has a very simple answer, because it has a very simple problem, and that is, look at what we've commodified in this country, and we'll see where the root of all of our problems is. Those upstream to healthcare and those directly related to healthcare. And what I mean by commodifying is, I mean that taking things that shouldn't, it costs money, that shouldn't
cost that much money,
or shouldn't be capitalized.
Right.
Is the root problem. So, I'm sure there's someone that could argue against me, that is not entirely anti-capitalist, that could still make a reasonable way in which things could all kind of fit together, where people can still feel like we live in a capitalistic environment without commodifying the basic necessities of life. I just don't feel that way. I look at capitalism as the root of all of our evils, especially the way capitalism is done in this country. And I'll give a non-health related example, but if capitalism is this kind of laissez-faire, free market, robber baron sort of environment, then why do taxpayers always have to bail out big companies only to be screwed over later, right? Why did we bail out airlines during COVID with taxpayer dollars while at the same time paying exorbitant airfare prices, only now to find out that companies, airlines are using something called surveillance AI, where they're sort of analyzing your Google queries to see if you have a death in the family or something urgent happening, in order to do like this sort of so-called price matching adjustment. So they're using surveillance AI in your queries in order to determine how much to charge you for a plane ticket. And it's being sold, at least to the consumer who recognizes this, who have heard about this, saying, oh, we really just want to be able to charge you what you can pay. But what that really means is, if you need to get out of town because your father died and you need to get back home, you're going to pay as much as whatever it costs, because you have to get there.
As much as you can pay. That's what that means. So, we want to get as much as we can out of you.
So what kind of capitalism is this, right?
Lord have mercy.
When these companies kind of run amok, right? So that's my argument, is that it really, and we ourselves is also commodified, right? Race is commodified. Black bodies are commodified. Immigrants are commodified. Yeah. And so we are all a part of this sort of capitalist structure. And I think that the health equity, or the equity question, is a more socialized approach. Is that the basic tenets of life should be shared across the population, especially in the richest country on earth. Yeah. Right? Every other major country has like a universal healthcare kind of system, right? They have mostly free or affordable college and education, right? These things, like, remember I mentioned, like, my first white friend and not having to pay gas money, kind of thing. It's y'all, hold on, y'all paying, why would y'all pay for healthcare? Like, why would y'all pay for to go to college, right? Like, why would you pay exorbitant prices for groceries or for food? But we do, because those things have been capitalized. So while this could be the richest country on earth, that doesn't trickle down to the everyday person. And so when I first got into, sort of this a political consciousness, one argument that I heard was, we want to give people a choice, right? We want to give people a choice what healthcare plan they could have, and not force down their throat a government plan, right? That's the BS that they came up with. But in at least 11 states in this country, you have no choice. Why don't you have any choice? Because even the Affordable Care Act, which is even still kind of a Band-Aid solution to the real problem, 11 states sued to not have to give insurance to their residents of their state, even though the federal government, under the Affordable Care Act, or AKA Obamacare, pays for 90% of the health care. So why are you as a state not allowing your people to be insured when the federal government will pay 90% of the health care costs? So it's deeper than we can't afford this, right? It's about power, the social determinants of power, right? It's about capitalism, about all these other factors. So people don't have a choice. And if you look at those 11 states, they are the most unhealthiest states in the country. If you look at Mississippi, it's the most uninsured state in the country and also the unhealthiest.
And somebody's benefiting off of that.
Right? And somebody's
benefiting off of that.
So what it means for me, to go back to your question, this was sort of really long-winded answer for in my mind, a simple solution.
You're a doctor.
We need to put the power in the hands of the people, and the way we put the power in the hands of the people is by allowing them to have a choice. It has to start at the policy level. We can do wellness classes, right? We can do teaching people about meditation, and me and you both work in like small group community stuff and teaching people how to take care of themselves, right? But a way that we really take care of ourselves is the ones who have the power and privilege is marching up to the legislators and saying, how do we change the policy so that people are not tasked with removing the burden that was placed upon them historically, and that benefits and extracts wealth from them. That's really how we save ourselves. That's really how we get free, is when we take our money out the hands of the capitalists and share it amongst ourselves and our community.
Man, that's dope. That's gonna be a clip right there. That's why I had to be quiet to make sure that we get that clip in, because that's definitely a moment. I appreciate you sharing that, because you got me thinking about this before we'll move to close. We were doing some workshops with some young people in the community in partnership with the good brother Stan the Man Martin and No Menthol Buffalo.
Yep. Shout out to Stan.
So we were doing some workshops to some community forum focus groups, asking young people about their thoughts and behaviors and ideas, just kind of around vaping. And particularly menthol vaping. And the question or idea came up, circled around to, well, why is it being sold? And would you sell it if you had an opportunity? Because they were saying these people, and it's all right. What if you had the opportunity to open up a store in our community? Would you sell it? Some kids was like, nah, I wouldn't do that. One young brother was like, they gonna buy it.
Yeah.
And it was capitalism. Because in his mind, it's I don't feel like I'm selling a poisonous product to my community or to my people or giving people access to something that's going to be detrimental to their health. I'm not looking at that I'm taking days or years or weeks of lives off of somebody's mama, daddy, brother, sister, husband, child. I'm not looking at it like that perspective. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking at it these people are customers to me, not people.
Yep.
And I think that's what capitalism does.
Exactly.
It takes people from people to customers, consumers, and numbers on a data sheet or something to be traded and sold on the market, and it dehumanizes people in a way. And so just hearing that young brother just kind of shook me, because I was the way he was talking, in my mind I was I don't know this young brother, but I know he's gonna be financially, he's gonna be successful at something.
Yeah.
Because he already got the mindset that even if I gotta do something that ain't necessarily morally cool or correct to make some money, I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
And that comes first. Money comes before morality sometimes in our society and in our community. And I'm having the privilege to live long enough that phrase, well, one generation tolerates, the next one embraces. So we, in our generation, in folks of us that's in our 30s and 40s, even upper 50s, we have a culture where we worship money and celebrity and attention, and then we look at people who come after us and wonder why we tolerated it and why they embracing it, taking it to a different level. And that young brother, I was looking at him, I was I couldn't be mad at him when I came from a culture that was get money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I can't. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So like even when you think about like from like health equity from like a moral standpoint, like who is benefiting off of like selling us poison, selling us things that are detrimental to us, but we've learned through like addiction, through maladaptive coping mechanisms and strategies that like these things work in the moment. And people will commodify and take advantage of us and then capitalize on that in this capitalist system. So yeah, just really understanding like this health equity thing is deeper than just go to the doctor and make the doctors available and make the doctors accessible. I think it deals with a lot of like what's going on with like the culture. And I understand culture as beliefs and behaviors that are rewarded and that are ridiculed. So like if these things that we all do and get rewarded, that's part of the culture.
Yeah.
And if we all agree that like we should ridicule that, then that's part of the culture to ridicule and ostracize that. So like we have to be reflective on what are the things that we ridicule and what are the things that we reward and be honest with ourselves. So this is dope. Looking forward to seeing y'all. If y'all enjoying this conversation, we're going to have deeper conversations like this in the breakout sessions at the Igniting Hope Conference this September 20th at the Jacobs School of Medicine. So just moving throughout our conversation, just encouraging people to be a part of this movement. For somebody who's never attended the Igniting Hope Conference, and somebody who's been a participant and a planner, what could they expect, and like why is it important for everyday folks, not just doctors such as yourselves or people who are working in community activism roles such as myself or researchers to be present? Why is it important for everybody to show up, even if they may think that like their role or title isn't relevant to the work of social determinants of health and strategic planning?
The irony is that I would assume that people who probably don't feel they belong there are probably the people we need the most.
Say that again.
People, the community.
Yeah.
So the people who may feel that they don't have the credentials or the degrees, those are the people that's going to ultimately change, which is, this conference this year, something special was going to happen actually around this very point. So the people that we need less of is maybe the people with credentials. We need just enough. We need just enough of them, the right ones, to know that they can sort of catch what the community is dropping and put that into practice, put that into play. But the reason why they should show up, because this is the people's conference, right? This is we have doctors and scientists and people coming and presenting, but this is the people's conference of how they can push back, right? Of where you could say, hey, y'all talking about all this AI and medicine stuff, that's a bunch of bullshit, because like what's that gonna do for us?
Right.
Or is that gonna make matters worse for us, or different things like that? This is an opportunity, for community people who may not think it, but people like a Mama Bar, Denise Bar, who's always on the cutting edge of what's happening on the ground.
Right.
Something big is going to happen around that this year, to really show the gratitude of having people like that show up. But that's why, because it really is the people's conference, and that is what's going to make a difference. Now, I will say I'm not a planner this year or doing anything up front. So, so let me
go back to being a participant.
Yeah, so as a participant, let me say this candidly. If you want to be heard, less is more, right? Like, what I mean by less is more, communicating your points to the right people at the right time. Now, sometimes people come and they grandstand because they got a lot on their chest, they got a lot to say, but, coming and sharing, sort of laser focus, this is what we need. I think that's what I mean by less is more. I'm not saying shut up. What I'm saying is actually communicate what you've been holding on to and what you've been seeing on the ground in front of the right groups, and I promise you momentum can happen in those breakout sessions or in the broader groups. And you might even be asked, hey, do you want to kind of join this small working committee to work on those problems and different things like that. So that's sort of what I mean by less is more. But if you get up and you ask a 20-minute question, you might be taking time from other people. You might feel good about it afterwards, but then you might feel like, well, what's actually going to change?
Right.
But the right place to the right people, the right time, the clear focus on not just this is what I'm seeing, but this is what y'all need to do. This what we need to do. I think it's a nice creates a nice like kind of discourse and environment, and let people share those kind of thoughts amongst themselves and put things into place.
Cool. I really appreciate the way you organized that and communicated that, because I think folks need to be encouraged, and that they need to hear the person with the PhD saying less PhDs, more you and me's. You know what I'm saying? So I think
exactly.
I got a lot more questions, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and get us out of here on maybe like one or two more. And I'm curious. So we have our theme of strategic plan, like the overarching umbrella, and under that we have some areas of focus this year. And I want to know what excites you the most. Which focus area excites you the most? So this year's conference, when you join us September 20th at the Jacobs School of Medicine, this Igniting Hope conference will focus mainly on primary care access and improving that, the quality of it, workforce development, housing, food access, and literacy. So, of those, which excites you the most, Dr. Williams?
That's tough. Okay, so literacy, food access, housing, something in primary care.
Workforce development. Food access. Yeah.
Ooh, that's tough because it all feels so interconnected. But I would say affordable, well, I should say affordable, that should go without saying. Accessible primary care access that's not too far, that's available, that's in touch with the community, that's there for maintenance and upkeep.
Yeah.
That have pleasant staff, that's not condescending and that understand what's going on. That's a space that's not sending referrals out to 20 different places that you're not going to really get a chance to go to, right? Like having that in place, I think might be maybe most important for me in terms of like stopping the bleed and the immediate sort of healthcare, like dire like healthcare needs that exist in the community right now. And workforce development is probably pretty high up there too. All of them are important. I would probably put literacy last.
Okay.
Because even though people like you and I are working on literacy at other levels, like at community-based levels, the only reason I rank that last is because I always think about the socio-ecological framework, where it's a bubble inside of a bubble inside of a bubble inside of a bubble, with the biggest, most influential bubble being policy and the smallest one being an individual. Again, why we should be able to defend ourselves in all ways, it shouldn't have to be the burden on an individual to educate themselves of how to navigate the oppressive system that was designed to extract from them. So, which is kind of the call out for people in power and privilege to create systems that alleviate that burden off of them. So I'm not saying don't be literate, but I'm saying that the more immediate changes is the structural changes. So I would say access to primary care and workforce development.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to read if you're dead.
Yeah. That's
it might be. I don't know. Somebody might be able to do it.
No. I mean,
I ain't never seen a dead person at the library.
But what would you say? What are you looking forward to the most?
Honestly, wow, you flipped the question back on the interviewer. But no, it's kind of funny because I would probably rank literacy pretty much up there because I work with so many young people and men who struggle to communicate and express themselves. And I think a lot of the work I do with like men in the mental health space, with young men and teens in general in the mental health space, and just in the overall youth development space, is people have issues communicating and going from like feeling to thought to language. And somewhere there's a disconnect, and people use terms that frustrate me, and I can't communicate that it's frustrating me because I have to be open and receptive and patient. But it's like I'm having a conversation and somebody's like, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, because you didn't say nothing. But I can feel it. And like you basically are saying like, you see how I'm talking. You see the emotion. You see the animation. You hear the tonality and the inflection and the emphasis on things. You know what I'm saying. You know what I mean? And it's like, I do. I just wish you would give me words. Yes, because I don't want to speak for you. And oftentimes I'm an advocate. So like, I don't want to advocate for you if this is not what you're saying. So like, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? You've been there before. So like, it is challenging when I am sitting there and I'm like, oh, brother, say what you got to say. Or we're engaging in relationships, both personal and professional, with our female counterparts. And we know that they have linguistic skills on average that far surpass the average male. So now there is a skill gap than just the ability to have a conversation. So like they're talking circles around men, and then the men I find who can communicate sometimes communicate sophisticated but in a combative way. Can communicate sophisticated but in a manipulative way. And it's not always for just general understanding. General, I want to understand where you coming from as a person. I want to understand and be understood. And I think that's the goal, at least my goal in conversation and communication. I want to be understood and I want to understand. And because so many people, especially young people, like I would jokingly say with them, I care about, I'm like, bro, you only got like a 75 word vocabulary. But like, it's a joke, but like, I'm serious. Like I'm hearing the same words used in repetition in order to communicate your thoughts, feelings, and justify your actions. And it's frustrating. So, and I wish that, when I worked in juvenile detention, and like, I don't read as much as I used to, but I used to read a lot because we couldn't have our phones. So I would be and it's like kiddie jail. And so I'm on the unit with like a little book in my back pocket or under my arm or something like that. And the young people and I would be reading stuff. Like I remember I read post-traumatic slavery disorder, and that was a interesting conversation. I apologize to all the white staff members who endured the projections of those young, angry black men who I inspired. Some of y'all deserved it, some of y'all didn't. But I would joke with them and say, like, if you could think without words, I give you all the money in my paycheck. And they'd sit there and do their damnedest to try to think without words. And I'm like, you can't do it. You can't think without words. So that means the fewer words you know, the fewer thoughts you're able to think. The more words you know, the more thoughts you're able to think. So you might want to learn some more words so you could think some more thoughts to think yourself out this situation you keep finding yourself in. That's the only way you're going to get, you got to think your way out, bro. That's the tool that you got with you at all times. So that for me is why I would say, even though we joke, like literacy is super important in that way, because I just want people to be able to communicate effectively and be able to express themselves, whether it's through language, through art, just be able to express yourself. Because what I would tell my god baby, and see now you done got me talking, when she was younger, she would like have regular adolescent episodes. And she would communicate her frustrations to me, and I would be like, well, did you tell them? She'd be like, no. I'm like, what you scared for? If you don't speak up for yourself, baby, these people will kill you and say you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I forgot who I got that quote from. That's not an original quote. But you have to speak. That's why written word is so important. That's why protest and marching is so important. People think people going and raising the sign and marching and having a protest is insignificant. It's not, because when you reflect upon history, it's to show this thing happened and people cared.
Yeah.
And if people don't say something or communicate that they care, these things will continue to happen. So I think for me, again, literacy is probably the one that I'm really most passionate about.
Well, let me just follow up really quickly.
Yeah.
What do you think is, and it's probably different reasons for different people, but if you could in some way sort of generalize or summarize a couple key themes, why do you think that lack of literacy is there from your experience?
So I think going back to like my I guess example of the more words you know, the more thoughts you could think. I think from like a deeper understanding, the oppressors have understood that to some degree. And so again, I'm always thinking about beauty commercials where it's like somebody is benefiting off selling you that you ugly. Like they telling you that you ugly, and now they're gonna benefit when you buy their product. But they had to sell you that you was ugly first. Like Malcolm said, who taught you to hate you?
Yeah.
So like I'm always thinking if there's like somebody being oppressed or if there's something being withheld, there's somebody benefiting from that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to lack of literacy, I would tell the young people too, they say you could be anything you want. Cool. There's only so much work for lawyers and doctors and politicians and insert traditional high-value societal role here. Now, if I'm an individual who's already attained and have one of those positions, do I want my son or my nephew, my niece or my daughter to get that position in the next generation, or do I want your little black ass to get it? I don't want your little black ass to get it. It's only so many positions to go around.
Yeah.
So I want to create as much and keep as many resources and access to opportunities within me and mine as possible.
Yes.
And the best way I can do that is to limit your ability to access anything through limiting your education and your ability to see things, words, sounds, and make sense of it. To be able to advocate and communicate. To say, hey, I want this, I need this, I could do this. You don't know that these things exist. There's, like I was saying before, there's people who are playing the game and there's people who don't even know there's a game going on. And the people who know there's a game are benefiting from the people who don't know there's a game going on. That's who we're playing. And so understanding that, knowing like if you, and having also too a mother who is functionally illiterate, like, and having to grow up with that, I can see like how it's held her back just in society. Like from her saying like, oh, on job application, I had to memorize everything because I couldn't read, or like I would look at somebody else. If it was like written stuff, I would look at what somebody else is writing on the application just so like the stress that it takes to navigate through that. So I think people are benefiting from that. You in the capitalist society, it's a pyramid, so you have to have people at the bottom. And so literacy and inhibiting people's ability to think for themselves is the key to keeping people at the bottom. That's why they prevented slaves from being able to read, because we don't want you to think.
Of course.
Yeah, we don't want you to think thoughts you never thought before, which is why I like having these kinds of conversations with people and sitting in rooms where people are discussing different topics, like September 20th at the Igniting Hope Conference, because you get a chance to sit in a room and think of thoughts you never thought before. And that is a tremendous gift.
Create new information, right?
New pathways, new ideas. You would have never thought some things were possible for your career path or for your life until you sat in a room and thought of thoughts you never thought before. Oh, these people is doing this and that. Okay. So to me, like, I think, again, I connect literacy like past just being able to pick up a book and read it and make sense of it. Is like, what's the internal dialogue like in your head? How do you communicate that and express yourself?
So I think, you know, from what I'm hearing, and I'm not speaking on your behalf and suggesting that you're, if you're familiar with the term, an Afro-pessimist or anything, about.
I've never heard that term, but please enlighten me.
Afro-pessimism is a sort of intellectual, like, Black radical framework that suggests that there is no such thing as a post-racial society. That seeing an Obama presidency or something like that doesn't mean that we're in a post-racial society. And I think the small nuance specifically within Afro-pessimism is that I think this is where the pessimism come in, and it might be people more educated who identify as such that might slightly correct me, but that there's no really way out kind of thing. I think that's the sort of conundrum that's there, and I'm not saying that specifically is what you think, but
that probably would be where I would draw the line.
But from where me too, right? But I think what we are talking about is somewhat the same thing. It's like, we probably both agree that there were systems in place that caused this illiteracy to exist. And I'm saying that we're going to talk about all these topics anyway at the Igniting Hope Conference, September 20th, right?
Jacob School of Medicine.
And I might be in the breakout rooms that's thinking more about, pushing and nudging some of my colleagues or people whose cards I might have in my Rolodex, like, to do more about changing the structure. And you might be like, while Jamal is trying to get the structure changed, get the strap, because it might not change anytime soon.
Right.
And even if it do change, we need to be prepared now.
Right.
And so I'm sort of playing devil's advocate because I'm also into the literacy perspective, and I'm also, suggesting and even thinking about forming like a small reading group around a book by Dr. Orasanmi Burton called Tip of the Spear, which is very close to home in Buffalo. He's talking about the so-called Attica uprising as this thing that wasn't really a single event that happened, but it was a long tradition of Black radicalism trying to get free within the carceral system. And that's just the tip of the spear of Black resistance, is incarcerated people who see sort of the many heads of oppression all in one being behind bars, right? So it goes beyond just a simple abolitionist perspective, but really goes sort of deeper into there. So, like, I am all for, like, that as well, and educating, and I talk to small community groups too about, like, hey, we really, from the literacy side of, we need to really be literate in understanding what our real problems are, so that we can address them. Because we might think the Arabs at the corner store is the problem because it costs 1.5 times the cost for a roll of toilet paper at the corner store than it do at the grocery store. But we might be missing the entire picture, is that we live in a food apartheid, right? Where there has been an immense amount of, like, wealth extraction and disinvestment and negligence that exist. And so people are just trying to get it how they live, right? People are seeing an opening and trying to do that. So while it's okay to push back on going back to, Stan the Man's, like, kind of realm, it's okay to push back on saying we don't want smoke shops here, because once they're here, it's hard for us not to purchase those, especially under the conditions and environments we in. But, don't take your eye off the target, which is the tobacco industry. Right. So, and going back again, and then I'll close it here to what I was talking about, the Indian occupation, right? What the British did was, in all of these colonial regions, from Palestine to South Africa to India, is they left a stink on these countries, which is where they used partitions, where there was this heterogeneous population of different ethnicities or Semitic groups or religions that all lived together, and they had to duke it out. I'm not saying that it was completely nonviolent. They had to fight it out and everything like that. But what happened is, when they left with these partitions. They drew maps of places that wasn't their land and said, when we give this land back, in some ways, it has to be like this. We're going to put the Muslims on the left of India and on the right of India. And this little piece called Kashmir right here, we don't really know what to do with that, so we're going to leave that up in the air until we figure it out. Indians and Pakistanis is fighting over Kashmir to this day. They both became sovereign nations in, I think, like 1948 or something like that. So it's like we sometimes need to be literate in thinking about who the real enemy is, right? The enemy is not the immigrants, right? The enemy is not the Mexican dude who can do the job cheaper for you, or the Yemeni dude who own a corner store around the corner, right? Or, you know, the Pakistani guy on the other side of Kashmir. The enemy goes more upstream.
Facts.
And we need to identify the problem in order to, what's the theme of this conference again? To
strategic plan.
Strategic plan.
Let me get it right. So I want to make sure I get it. I want to make sure I get it correct. The theme of this year is saving ourselves, implementing a community plan for health equity. That's the strategic plan. And we focusing on primary care, workforce development, housing, food access, and literacy.
And that's how we do it.
Yeah. So, man, listen. This has been a tremendous conversation. I gotta bring you back for a conversation on a deeper conversation on ADHD, because apparently I have time blindness, because we've been talking for a minute.
Okay.
And I ain't got no problem keeping you here, chopping it up with you. But yeah, no, this has been a dope conversation, good brother. Is there anything that you want to share that you didn't get a chance to share? I think I have one more question for you as we get out of here. It's kind of a two-parter. So how do you balance doing high-level research with everyday community work, and what do you think the landscape of health equity in Buffalo will look like in 10 years?
Yeah, so balancing it is tricky. One good part is that I don't have to entirely live the sort of double life of, like, you know, academic by day and trying to do social justice work by night. When I got hired here, I made sure that it was space created for me to do community health work, to do a certain level of engagement, was instrumental in creating like certain committees. And you know, we have more than enough committees, but at least the ones, you know, I was involved in, of like redistributing our not only like wealth and some financial things, but also like resources. So from that perspective, the balance has become more harmonious with like the fabric of just who I am, and working super hard for other people without losing my integrity, so that when opening up my own research group like I have now, we can add all those things into the mix, right? We can talk about other topics as the way like they're related to like my specialty, but also my personal interests. But at the same time, I do get, you know, and I have trouble thinking about like when a pressure gets turned up, that not doing enough, right? Like, so I'm working on these like structural issues. I'm trying to use, you know, the blessings that I've been afforded, but when I see people getting wrangled up by ICE unjustly, when I see you know, genocides happening, when I see you know, AI is something that we use in the lab as well, being more of an extractive technology from working class people. When I see all these things happening around me, I get a little down, because I feel like I'm trying to work on structural things, but then it's like whack-a-mole, because these things are evolving super fast and people are getting hurt, and I'm just a professor at the end of the day, and it's tough. But you know, that's why I said earlier, you know, pull up for the conference, because it's the people's conference. Because you know, don't just pull up for yourself. Pull up for me a little bit, because you know I need to feel that sense of connectedness, being in these like abstract walls sometimes, and feeling like it's a vacuum that doesn't always have to confront the real issues of the world, but or feeling that I'm not equipped to do it. And the other part of your question was,
The health equity.
what do I see like health equity being? Honestly, I hope that a lot of the language and discourse that we've created in the academy can be eroded over time. To be honest with you, I feel like social determinants of health. I know it's sort of just been erected in popular discourse over the last 10 years, but social determinants of health, health equity, all these terminologies that we're educated with now and that we have been educating can become useless in the same ways that I always had an imagination about DEI's offices becoming useless, not in the way that this administration thinks so, right? Because it's just a proxy for, a black, support structures or something like that. It's been used as a proxy for this administration. DEI just means helping out people that we don't care about. But I always had an imagination about these kind of offices not having to exist. Yeah. And that's how we know we're really free. That's how we know we really have equity, when we don't need to constrain certain offices and entities like this. How does health equity look for me is when we don't need a Buffalo Center for Health Equity anymore, because we all free and we can kind of go on and do other things.
I understand
and
exactly
graduate, right? So that's what freedom kind of looks like to me, which is essentially tethered to health equity.
That's beautiful, brother. That is beautiful. I relate to what you're saying so much. I'm just thinking when I used to work in juvenile detention and just really telling young people, like, the fact that, like, I have a job sucks. But, like, the fact that, like, this place even exists for them to send you sucks. Yeah. The fact that as a society we got to house and jail teenagers. Yeah. The fact that we got 15-year-old attempted murderers that are left under my care in an unsecured building. Yeah. Like, I worked in an adolescent HIV clinic, and I was doing my social work internship when I was working to get my master's at UB, and I worked in the youth link clinic, and we had survivors of sexual assault, and I would just go, like, into my car and just sit in the parking lot and be like, can't believe this fucking place exists. Can't believe this fucking place exists. Like, why? Like, why do we live in a world where, like, there's funding, there's a job, it's an office, it's a caseload of little kids getting sexually assaulted every week? This is crazy. This is crazy. Like, just so when you say, like, you want to get to a place where, like, this stuff don't exist, trust me, brother, I feel you. Yeah. Trust me, brother, I feel you. I would just sit there and be like, man, God, I would like to do something else in my life. Yeah, we can just disperse. Right? We can disperse. Yeah. We can go on and do something else. I could not agree with you more, brother. Yeah. But to everybody that's still in those roles and still in those positions fighting the good fight, please take care of yourself. Come to our conference, man, and let your voice be heard. Yeah. Again, we're having Community Day. We're going to kick it on Friday, September 19th at MLK Park. It's going to be food trucks, good vibe, music, resources, like a community party kind of vibes. And then Saturday, September 20th is go time. We are going to have the Igniting Hope Conference at the Jacobs School of Medicine. Please be sure to register at buffalohealthequity.org. That's buffalohealthequity.org. And I will drop the link in the show description. I am Sherman Webb-Middlebrooks, lifelong Buffalo resident, full-time black man. He is the good brother, Dr. Jamal Williams, associate professor over at the University at Buffalo. SUNY Uni at Buffalo. I remember it was University of Buffalo, and I keep remembering to switch the of and at, man. But this is Igniting Hope Radio. We look forward to seeing you at the Igniting Hope Conference. And until then, in the words of my hero, the honorable late, great Jerry Springer, y'all take care of yourselves and each other. Peace.
Beautiful. Thank you, man.
Thank you, bro.